All right, so we're back for another deep dive.
Right?
And today we're really tackling something that I think is on everybody's mind pretty much all the time. It's this idea of success.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at some source material that kind of pokes some holes in the idea of success as we know it
Exactly.
and ask the question, is success really all it's cracked up to be? Or is it more like an illusion? Something that we're chasing but never quite grasp. So to kick things off, we've got some really interesting podcast excerpts that we're going to be diving into today
Yeah, some really interesting stuff.
that really challenge this traditional sort of recipe that we've all been given for what a successful life looks like.
Yeah, and I think this is relevant for all of us because we've all spent some time thinking about what success means to us
Oh, yeah.
and whether we've achieved it or not or how we're going to get there.
Right.
So I think it's a really fascinating deep dive to kind of question this whole thing.
Absolutely. And I think everyone listening has probably got their own sort of internal picture of what success looks like. Maybe it's certain milestones in your career, maybe it's a certain amount of money in the bank or a certain level of recognition.
Sure.
But the material we're going to be looking at today, I think might actually make you rethink some of those assumptions. And in fact, we're going to be exploring why chasing that traditional definition of success might actually lead to less happiness, not more.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think is so fascinating about this material is that it really is about the idea that this constant pursuit of success that we think is going to make us happy actually might not be what we think it is.
Right. And that's actually a perfect segue into the first major theme that emerges from the source material, and that is the idea of success as this kind of endless chase.
Oh, the endless chase.
And it's that feeling of never quite arriving.
Yeah.
No matter how much you accomplish, there's always that next goalpost that seems to magically appear just as you reach the previous one.
It's so true. Like you finally get that promotion you've been working towards. You feel like you're on top of the world.
Right. You're like, yes, I
Yeah.
conquered Mount Everest in my office.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then almost immediately your brain starts to recalibrate. And suddenly it's not enough anymore. You're already eyeing the next promotion, the bigger paycheck, the corner office. It's like you're on this never-ending treadmill, you know?
It really is.
Yeah.
It's like that classic cartoon of the dog chasing its tail round and round, putting in all this effort, but never actually getting anywhere truly new. And our source even uses this really vivid analogy of success being like a mirage.
Ooh, I like that.
You see it shimmering there on the horizon, promising you this oasis of satisfaction.
Right.
But the closer you get, the more it seems to recede. And even if you do somehow manage to reach that spot, it's just more desert.
Yeah, it's like you can never quite quench that thirst.
Right, exactly. So I guess the takeaway here is that if you're constantly chasing after something that keeps moving further away, you're never going to experience that lasting satisfaction, right? And it almost turns this idea of achievement into this perpetual cycle of just wanting more. Does this resonate with you at all? Have you ever hit a goal and then instantly thought, okay, what's next?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a really common human experience,
Yeah.
you know? And it makes you wonder why we're so caught up in this cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually brings us to another really interesting point that's raised in our source material. And it's this idea that maybe the reason we're so stuck on this treadmill is because we haven't really stopped to examine where our ideas of success actually come from.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Because so often it seems like our understanding of what it means to be successful is handed down to us rather than something we've consciously chosen for ourselves.
Right. It's like we inherit it.
Exactly. Like, think about it. Where did your personal definition of success come from? Was there some sort of epiphany, some deep moment of self-reflection where you went, ah, this is what success means to me?
Right.
Or is it more like you just kind of absorbed it from society, from your parents, from the things you saw on TV or now on social media?
It's true. I mean, you just look at Instagram and everyone's presenting this perfectly curated, filtered version of success.
Oh, yeah.
And it's easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to that and thinking that that's the standard.
Exactly. It's like we're all given the same blueprint for success, regardless of whether it actually fits our individual personalities or values or goals.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting about that is that the source material points out that this definition of success, it's not even fixed.
Right.
It changes across different cultures and across different time periods, you know?
No, right.
What's considered successful in one place might be completely irrelevant somewhere else.
Totally. If you had been born in a totally different culture, your whole idea of what you'd be striving for, how you'd measure your achievements, it could be completely different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe instead of climbing the corporate ladder, Success would be about the strength of your community ties or your ability to, I don't know, play a really mean didgeridoo.
Oh,
It really makes you wonder, have you ever really taken a step back and questioned whose definition of success you're actually working towards?
that's such a great question. And I think it's one that we all need to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if we're chasing a definition that isn't truly our own, can we ever really feel fulfilled?
Right. It's like trying to wear someone else's clothes. They might look amazing on them, but on you, they're just not quite right.
Totally. It's never going to feel quite like a perfect fit.
Exactly. So let's say you do manage to tick off all the boxes on this sort of externally imposed checklist of success. Does that automatically translate into a lifetime supply of happiness and inner peace? Well, our sources suggest that maybe, just maybe, it's not that simple. In fact, they propose this rather counterintuitive idea that achieving success, as it's traditionally defined, might actually lead to more stress, not less.
Really, so it's not just rainbows and butterflies once you reach the top.
Well, that's what we're led to believe, right? That once you hit those milestones, you can finally relax, breathe a sigh of relief, and just coast on this wave of contentment.
Right.
But the source material suggests that it can actually breed a whole new set of anxieties.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like you finally get that fancy title, the corner office, the big salary, and suddenly you're lying awake at night worrying about how to hold on to it all.
Oh, yeah, the pressure to stay on top.
Right, you're constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about someone younger and hungrier coming up behind you.
It's like that fear of falling from grace that you were talking about before.
Yeah, exactly. The higher you
Mm.
climb, the further you have to fall, right? And our source actually uses a couple of really interesting examples to illustrate this point. Like, think about someone who finally achieves significant wealth. There's definitely that initial thrill, that sense of security,
Right.
but then what? The worries set in.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
You start thinking about investments, about the markets crashing, about how to preserve this wealth for your family.
Right, and it's like you've just traded one set of problems for a different, maybe even more high-stakes set of
They're
problems.
always playing defense, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about money either. The source also talks about how people who achieve fame often end up grappling with this intense pressure to stay relevant, to keep producing work that meets these incredibly high expectations.
That must be so much pressure.
Oh, it definitely is. And then there's this whole other layer of constantly having to manage public opinion, which, as we all know, can be incredibly fickle.
Ugh, yeah, I can't even imagine.
It's really interesting, right? Because it challenges this whole idea that success equals peace and happiness.
It really does.
Have you ever noticed this yourself? Maybe in yourself or in people you know who have achieved what we would consider conventional success. Have you ever noticed that sort of underlying hum of anxiety that seems to come with it?
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And I think the source material points out that a lot of that comes from this attachment to outcomes and to external validation.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's like we're constantly seeking approval and validation from outside sources instead of finding that sense of peace and contentment within ourselves.
exactly. It's like we're always looking for someone else to tell us we've made it instead of trusting our own internal compass.
Right. And so the source contrasts this with the idea that true peace, that true sense of fulfillment, comes from not being so attached to these external outcomes. It's about finding a state where your sense of self-worth isn't dependent on these constantly shifting measures of achievement.
I love that idea. Detaching from outcomes, finding that internal peace, it's so powerful.
It really is. So if this whole chasing after success thing can sometimes lead to dissatisfaction and anxiety, as we've discussed, what's the alternative? Does that mean we just give up on trying to do anything meaningful with our lives?
No, not at all. It's not about giving up on action, it's about shifting our focus.
Okay.
The source material suggests that instead of obsessing over this end goal of success, we should really focus on engaging fully in activities that we genuinely enjoy, right here, right now.
So it's not about becoming passive. It's not about just sitting on the couch and letting the world pass you by. It's about being active, creative, engaged, but with a different kind of fuel driving you.
Right.
You're doing it because you find it intrinsically rewarding, not just as a means to an end, not just as a stepping stone on this mythical path to success.
Yeah, it's like the difference between playing a sport because you love the game itself versus playing it just to win a trophy that's just going to sit on a shelf.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think this is a really crucial point that the source makes, which is about letting go of that tight grip on the outcome. It's about finding joy and fulfillment in the process itself, rather than solely in the potential rewards or recognition that might come later.
I think that's such an important shift in perspective
Yeah.
because we're so conditioned to be goal-oriented, to be constantly striving for something just beyond our reach.
Right, and the source even contrasts this with, what we're always told, right? Work hard, achieve success, and then you'll be happy.
Right.
And it's suggesting that maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's find happiness now by engaging in things you genuinely find meaningful, and then this traditional idea of success won't hold quite the same sway over
I
you.
love that.
That's pretty powerful stuff, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really liberating idea.
So I guess the question for all of us is, what are those activities that really light us up? What are those things that we do just because we love doing them, regardless of whether they lead to some external stamp of approval?
Exactly. What brings you that sense of flow where time just melts away?
Yeah, I think tapping into that, focusing on those inherent motivations is what can lead to a much more lasting sense of fulfillment than just constantly striving for external validation, which, let's face it, might never truly satisfy us anyway.
I completely agree.
So let's wrap up here. I think our deep dive today has really brought up some fascinating and potentially perspective shifting ideas about this whole concept of success.
It really has.
We've explored this argument that the pursuit of success can often feel like this endless treadmill where the finish line keeps moving further and further away.
Yeah.
We've looked at how our very understanding of what it means to be successful is often shaped by forces outside of ourselves rather than our own inner compass.
Right.
And we've considered the unexpected baggage that achieving conventional success can bring, all that anxiety, that pressure to maintain it all.
And I think the most important takeaway from all of this is that maybe there's a different way to approach this whole thing. That instead of chasing after success, we can focus on finding fulfillment in the present moment by doing things we genuinely love without being so attached to specific outcomes.
I think that's a great way to sum it up. So I guess the question for everyone listening is, are you consciously charting your own course, driven by what truly matters to you? Or could you be caught in this endless pursuit of an illusion? This shimmering mirage of achievement that never quite delivers that lasting fulfillment?
That's a great question, and it makes me wonder if this traditional idea of success is really more of a story we tell ourselves, then what does a truly meaningful and fulfilling experience actually look like to each of us? What does it look like to you listening? That's something I think we can all ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's a perfect note to end on, so thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.